Hello and welcome into another episode of Thulin Takeover. This is coming to you on a Thursday. I know I've been fluctuating around Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think it's going to be Thursday from now on. So welcome to a Thulin Takeover Thursday. And today I'm going to talk about the big news on the day, and that is Roy Williams retiring. There's also some other news, including Chris Beard going to Texas. We're seeing the Oklahoma job opening up. Utah got Craig Smith. Indiana hired Mike Woodson. But the biggest news of all the coaching hirings is all outweighed by the fact that Roy Williams is retiring. So I just want to talk to you about the ramifications of Roy retiring, his impact on college basketball as a whole, and just what it means to me personally. I have no ties to Carolina. I just appreciate basketball. And as a person who has loved college basketball all his life, and in fact, the first game I can remember watching was as about a 4 or 5-year-old in Zion National Park in Utah. I watched J.J. Redick and Duke take on Roy Williams and North Carolina that featured Rashad McCants, Sean May, some great players. The Carolina team in 2005 won the national championship. That's the first national championship that I can recall watching live. I've watched a lot of them in repeats on YouTube, but long story short, Roy Williams and North Carolina is part of the reason that I fell in love with basketball. One of the first players I loved watching in college basketball was Ty Lawson, the Carolina Tar Heel. The 2009 tournament, Carolina won. Roy was a part of it all. More importantly than his success was his sustained success taking over from Dean Smith. A lot of people have tweeted today, and there will be this narrative forever, especially around North Carolina where basketball is so prominent, that Roy Williams saved Carolina basketball. And if you think about all the rich history, that's a very important thing to do. They maintain this rivalry, and Roy and Coach K dueled that made the rivalry so much richer. Yes, there was a rivalry before that, but now the rivalry is like what I see it as is I see Roy and Coach K, and I'm not sure I'll ever unsee that. I understand the history before that, but whoever fills in for Roy, which I'll address in a little bit, I really don't think it'll look the same without Roy and Coach K. It happens to be April Fool's today. I was sure when I saw this news when I woke up this morning that it was a prank, and then I looked into it and I was like, wow, it could be real. Could be real. He kissed the court on senior day. He had his first loss in the first round ever. That was 29-1 in the first round for Roy Williams. He was also a class act. You saw him, competitive, fiery guy. But he was a class act. He made the college basketball a lot richer, carried a program that one of the Blue Bloods that was one of the most successful programs in the past 20 years. And he brought them to new heights. In his 17, 18 years there, he had 3 national championships. He made countless Sweet 16s, Final Fours, Elite Eights. ACC tournaments weren't the kindest to the Carolina Tar Heels, as they have 6 or 7 losses in the championship game, but they've won the regular season countless times. And with all of this, I think Roy's underappreciated, and his legacy isn't only tied to Carolina. He coached at Kansas, coaching Paul Pierce, Nick Collison, Kirk Heinrich, a lot of these star players, and we all think of him as Carolina and the Argyle, the baby blue, Carolina blue. But he was at Kansas. He had an impact before then. And it was jarring the more I think about it to think, wow, college basketball will no longer have Roy Williams in it. And I know he's healthy and well, but it just feels wrong to think about college basketball without Roy Williams. And so I wanted to start this episode talking about Roy, some of the things that I hold near and dear to me is my favorite games. I'm not a Carolina fan. I'm not a Duke fan, but Carolina and Duke is must watch. Even this season where neither team was all that good, and he contributed to that. There was an elegance to the game where Roy was in his patented jackets with the patches with the Carolina blue on it. He wore the sweaters. He wore his ties. Coach K was out there. They both are scowling and screaming. There was an elegance to the rivalry provided by the coaching duel. Roy kept this style of basketball where they'd play fast. He was stubborn. He played 2 bigs all the time, but played incredibly fast. It was dominated using the secondary break. You see so much of what college basketball is in my eyes as a 20-year-old guy who just started watching basketball as soon as he could really remember anything. Roy has dominated my view of college basketball, and it was jarring to think about the world without him in the college basketball world. Now I'll get to a little more of the coaching stuff, but I want to address who I think is going to hire them. There's a lot of people saying that Jay Wright, Mark Few, some guys like that, very high up there names on the board of college basketball, will be taking the Carolina job. I've heard even John Shire, a Duke assistant coach, Duke former player, will cross over and be the Carolina coach. I think they're going to hire internally. I think that it boils down to Wes Miller or Hubert Davis. And I'd be pretty stunned if it were someone other than that. And like Eric Musselman's a hot name. He just led Arkansas to the Elite Eight, was just eliminated by Baylor. I'd be pretty stunned if anyone takes this job, much less a Mark Few at Gonzaga, who people are saying, oh, he can't turn down that much money. Mark Few can get more money from Gonzaga. He's content. He loves the small town. Look at the program he's built, and it's doing better right now than the Carolina team. So I don't see that one. Jay Wright, they beat Carolina. They played one of the best national championships ever, and they've had more success than Carolina of late. I can see that being possible, but I don't think so. I think it boils down to the internal. Wes Miller or Hubert Davis are the candidates. What this means for Carolina basketball is yet to be determined. Like I said, Roy Williams had a legacy taking over for Dean Smith. And, they were able to recruit, but they weren't a recruiting powerhouse. They would keep some players a few years and then get some 5-stars, and that mix would lead them to great success. Their national champions, their most recent national championship, they had Joel Berry as a senior. They had Marcus Page, wasn't there that year, but he was there for many years and hit that incredible shot in the loss to Villanova. They had Bryce Johnson stay. They've had Luke May. Just a lot of players that have stayed more years than you'd think, and they built a program of, hey, we can recruit with anyone. We can produce one and dones, and they've done that, but they also can keep high-level players multiple years, and that's a difficult thing to sustain and balance. And we've seen the recent years been a little bit harder, but I would say COVID factored in, but the year prior to that was an interesting one. Long story short, I just wanted to pay my respects to Roy Williams and making college basketball something that I love. I think he was a bigger factor than I realized, as today I've just mulled on it. And Roy Williams is no longer the head coach of North Carolina, and it doesn't sit right with me. And I didn't really think that would be an issue. So kudos to Roy Williams. And I think his career accomplishments might even be overshadowed. Everyone thinks like, oh, Roy's a blue blood head coach. He's great. But I think he might even be better than people think. I think a lot of people chalk it up to just his recruiting, being a blue blood, taking over from Dean Smith. But he saved Carolina basketball, as so many people have said, and he kept them a powerhouse. And he had them winning consistently, winning championships, winning the ACC. So kudos to Roy Williams. I hope he enjoys retirement. It is going to be weird. It's going to take some adjusting to. But I just wanted to start this show off talking about Roy. Next up, I'll talk about – I know we've got the Final Four, but I want to talk about the coaching, because we're going to talk about the Final Four on the regular episodes, and I'll give you a little insight into some keys that I think of. But coaching has been, in these days in between games, has been the main talk. And the biggest news, other than the Roy retiring today, was Chris Beard, formerly of Texas Tech, transferring to Texas, taking over for Shaka Smart. And this has been one that has happened. Like, there's been rumor of this for a few years. This didn't take me by surprise at all. But this is one that's going to irritate a lot of fans, because, Texas Tech kind of was a program where they had Tubby Smith. They had one really good year, and then Chris Beard took over and had instant success, making the Elite Eight, the national championship game, and made them into a branded basketball school. And I think the lack of loyalty is what's irritating a lot of Big 12 fans. But Chris Beard went to college at Texas. I think that anytime you get more money, it's impossible. And I'm curious to see what happens at Texas. Texas has all the ability to recruit. It's such a brand name. It's got the most money of any school in the country athletically. And you're going to see a school that's not doing their best in football. They finally had a really good year in basketball, but it was ended with disappointment, losing in the first round. They've got a very gritty, tough-minded coach that's been probably one of the hottest names rising up the boards as among the legends, saying like, oh, Chris Beard is a top 10 coach. I, in my coach's poll, had him around 14, I believe. And I think he could raise up that with more time at Texas Tech. And I'm going to see how that impacts him being at Texas, being at a big school. Can he recruit differently? Does he recruit better? Does he recruit different players? Because he had a style. It was gritty dudes that were kind of underrated, slept on, and he built them into this program that relied on toughness and physicality and had some veterans on the team. Texas is going to be a one and done factory. It always has. I mean, in the recent years, we've got Jared Allen, Mo Bamba, Miles Turner, so many big guys that you're going to have. Greg Brown, Kai Jones going. Kai Jones stayed 2 years, but same idea. This is a draft factory. You're going to see players go in and out of there, and I wonder if it's sustainable to expect him to win like he did in Lubbock. And I'm curious to see which side benefits the most. And I'm also curious to see if Texas Tech stays on the map as a basketball school, because they certainly were becoming one of the trendier programs and one of the more popular picks to be kind of taking over the throne for Kansas. Kansas has been the Big 12 reigns supreme, and obviously Baylor's really, really picking it up and upping the throttle. But Kansas has won 16 of the last 18 now, Big 12s. That's ridiculous. At one point, they'd won like 15 straight. So it'll be interesting to see how Chris Beard does. And I'm curious, a lot of people are saying that Texas Tech will hire internally, and the guy who kind of masterminded the program was there for a while. Assistant coach might be taking over. So that's something to watch. Talking about a little bit about some other hires, some openings. We saw Lon Kruger of Oklahoma, keeping it within the Big 12, decided to retire as well. That was less of a shock to me. Still sad. I ranked him very highly in my coaches poll, as I did Roy, as I did Chris Beard. This is an episode. I think this is the Thulin Takeover #1. This one, if you guys want to watch that, that'll talk about why I'm referring to this. It's where I ranked coaches as opposed to teams. A little play on words there. But long story short, I think that Oklahoma is a really good destination playing in the Big 12. And I think some guys that they're going to be looking for, the North Texas head coach, who would be a really good hire there after his success. You saw them beat Purdue in the tournament. Really played a nice style, open. It honestly reminded me a bit of Oklahoma, to be honest. That's McCasland from North Texas. And a couple other names to look around for Oklahoma would be, you'll get some openings from Oklahoma. Is going to be a desirable place, but I think Grant McCasland of North Texas might be the lead candidate. I think Wojciechowski from Marquette is going to have a chance to coach another time, and I'm curious to see how that fills out. So that's kind of the main candidate two places, Lubbock and Oklahoma, that I see as main destinations now. That Carolina, I think, will be hiring internally. I guess that's the #1 one, but I feel pretty confident that's going to be Wes Miller or Hubert Davis, to reiterate. As for the coaching hires of late, we briefly mentioned this on the regular episode. Utah hired Craig Smith from Utah State. I think that's going to be a great hire. All he's done is won. He's taken Utah State to the tournament 3 times. Well, only 2 technically, but they won their tournament, so that was certainly going to get them a bid, and they would have gotten one anyway in the year where COVID wiped out the tournament. I think that if you go to a state school and you're able to recruit like that at Utah State, and now you're at University of Utah, you should be able to compete, should be able to win. Obviously, it's a raise up in competition. The Pac-12 is a little better than the Mountain West, although I think the Mountain West is a pretty good basketball conference. I'm curious to see what happens with that, how he recruits in state. One of the top prospects in Utah just offered again. Larry Kristoviak had done the same. Now he had to offer again. He's already trying to make his mark in the state of Utah itself. And perhaps the biggest hiring so far in the offseason was Mike Woodson to Indiana, returning to his alma mater, trying to replicate the success Juwan Howard's had at Michigan, a star at the program, a guy who's had NBA head coaching success, an African-American male who could rally the troops and bring back the glory days from when under Bobby Knight. We saw Tom Crean have success at Indiana, but nothing to the standards of the basketball crazed nation of Indiana. Hoosier Nation wants success, and they want it now. And I think that's going to be hard to adjust to NBA. You get professionals. Now you've got kids. You've got a mass exodus of transfers. And that's going to bring me to my next point, but I'll finish this thought. They've got some of their best players. I don't think that Trace Jackson Davis will return. I think he's going to try to test the draft waters. And if he does test draft waters and returns to college, I'd be surprised if he goes back to Indiana, not being recruited by the same coach. Archie was there. You got Armand Franklin, who was their second best player this year, is transferring. Al Durham just committed to Providence as a grad transfer. Christian Lander, their 5-star point guard, who reclassified and played this year to try to make the most out of the season with Trace Jackson Davis, had the body of a high schooler, wasn't ready for Big Ten play. He's still 18 years old and a 5-star point guard, and he's in the transfer portal as well. It'll be very interesting to see how much leeway they give him in Bloomington. That is one of the more interesting things I'll be monitoring this year to see. Do they expect the success Juwan Howard had right away for Woodson, or are they going to give him a little more leeway to build the program? Speaking of Juwan Howard, that was the AP National Coach of the Year this year. That's a tough thing to follow, and it seems very much like the exact same formula. So that'll be very interesting to monitor. And I mentioned I'd talk about the transfer portal a little bit. I gave my thoughts on this briefly in the main episodes, but I'll say this. I think the transfer portal is a great tool to have for players who are not feeling like they're getting the right playing time, players that don't think they're furthering their career in the right way, whether it's going to be the pros, whether they need some education. But I do think that it's becoming free agency. I don't think it's becoming better for basketball. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have the same teams win the transfer market as they would if it were solely recruiting. And that's what it is. It's recruiting all over again. It's what can we offer you? And it's going to make the leagues more top heavy, and it's going to take away the closing of the gap that some of these schools have had. The mid majors are closer than ever to the high majors, and so on and so forth. You're seeing more upsets, and there's no coincidence in my mind that there's more 215s and there are more 116s, 314s. Upsets than there's ever been. It's because there's more disparity, there's more dispersion of talent, and more disparity in the sense of if you're doing the transfer portal, there will be more disparity. Right now, it's just talent is dispersed, and I think the transfer portal, the instant year, you don't have to wait a year. There's no, I don't want to say punishment, but there's no resulting consequence for transferring, that you don't immediately get to transfer. It's not all going your way as a player, unless you get a waiver, is going to be a negative product on college basketball. I heard Matt Painter, who said pretty much exactly this. He said, we're a top 20 program in the country, and it'll benefit us because of that. But if everyone wants to make transfers, it's not going to benefit everyone. And I don't think it benefits us like it would benefit Duke or Kentucky. And he's saying that about Purdue. Purdue was in the Elite Eight not too long. They're a 4 seed this past tournament. I understand they lost in the first round. Speaking of Purdue, I think they're going to be a top 5 team in the country at some point next year. So you can mark that one down as a bold prediction. They're extremely talented. Matt Painter is one of my favorite coaches in the country, one of the most underrated coaches in the country. But if he understands the nuance of the game, that the game is now becoming who has the flashiness, who can promise you a way to the NBA. And I don't think that there's going to be as many people who opt to take the route that CJ McCollum took at Lehigh. I don't think there's going to be so many people that are enamored by the idea of Damian Lillard at Weber State, Max Asmus at Oral Roberts this year. My point being is that I don't think the transfer portal should continue this way, but I think it will. I think it's going to become just like NBA free agency. The balance of power will shift to the players, and I'm not sure it'll produce better results. Like if you're irritated by seeing the Brooklyn Nets, which I personally am, I think it's ridiculous. I don't think Blake Griffin or LaMarcus Aldridge are all that great right now. But what I will say is that they would still be paid more money if they were playing elsewhere because of the caliber of basketball players they are. And they've already joined a team that should be miles over the salary cap, because they lost all their depth, and now they've added all-stars, like 6 times all-stars. They got 5, 6-time or more all-stars and all NBA players under the cap. And it's ridiculous to me. So this is what college basketball might become, and that is a fear of mine. So that's a lot of college basketball talk in terms of hirings, firings, retirings, and the transfer portal. There's some really big name players in there this year. Marcus Carr, who could be an All-American. Walker Kessler was a 5-star recruit. Adam Miller at Illinois is transferring or intends on transferring. He's entered the transfer portal. Jordan Goldwire of Duke's a big name. I know he's not a huge points guy, but a hugely impactful player. You're seeing so many players enter the portal. You're seeing powerhouse ACC teams lose a lot of players. Virginia has lost 3 players to the portal, and that's your ACC champion. That's a model of success. And even that type of school, it could be suffering for this. I also think that a lot of teams like that can reap rewards where there's glaring holes to a roster. For instance, Sam Hauser is going to play pro. Jay Huff is going to play pro. Trey Murphy could be going pro. That'll be very interesting to me. And I think I'll do a podcast coming up soon talking about players that could benefit from a year staying or going. And I'll tell you who I think could benefit from what. And he'll certainly be on the list. I think he could really benefit from another year in the college game and improve his game. But the fact that he's long and shoots the ball incredibly and is very athletic, I think that makes him a successful pick, that he could come this year and get taken at the end of the first round, early second round, and have a successful NBA career. I think next year, if he were to come back, he could be a lottery pick. That's something for him to weigh. There's always risk to that, but there's going to be other players, not only him, that are in that boat. But long story short, Virginia is going to have openings, and that's the team that just won the ACC. When I say basketball, the first thing that kind of pops in my head, at least, is the ACC. And I know the Big Ten was better this year. I know the Big 12 was better this year. I know a lot of people say the Pac-12 was better this year because of the results in the tournament. The ACC is so basketball rich that if the team that wins the ACC is having trouble retaining players due to the transfer portal, I think that that's going to happen to anyone. And that may be a recurring problem for a lot of programs, including some of the best programs in the country, such as Virginia. And I've got one. I'll give you guys a little insight onto what I think is going to happen in the Final Four, and let you in on some news that I've heard. Gonzaga has possibly a positive test. They're trying to explore options, could confirm just whether they're positive or not. I'm not certain. There hasn't been too many updates on this, but that could have huge ramifications. This is an undefeated season. They're 30-0 right now, chasing perfection for the first time since the Indiana Hoosiers did in 1976. That's hugely impactful. I think if Gonzaga is able to be healthy and play that game, I think they should have a very good look to beat UCLA and do so handily. I think a lot of the things UCLA has been able to do have been incredibly impressive. And Mick Cronin, another guy that I thought was underrated. I said early in this thing that UCLA is the best team in the Pac-12. Chris Smith got injured. That kind of shook them. Their defense struggled, and now they look like a Mick Cronin coached team, a team that is defensively grinding, and a team that's hitting shots and playing in close games and thriving in close games. I think Jaime Jaquez has really improved his stock. He could be a draft pick. Johnny Juzang has become comfortable. He's a product of the transfer portal that's worked in a positive light. That doesn't always happen. But I do think that Gonzaga, if healthy and able to play, have too many weapons, are able to speed up the game, and their defense is so underrated. You saw them play against USC and just make USC look uncomfortable offensively. And then, of course, if you're not scoring, that's your best option against Gonzaga, is try to score because you know they're going to score. You can play great defense, but they're still going to score. And that's concerning if I'm UCLA, is the fact that we just played a 51-49 game against Michigan, and now we're going to have to score around 80 to 85 points, and I'm not even sure that's enough. That'll be interesting because you don't want to get in a track meet with Gonzaga. And if you try to slow it down too much, I think Gonzaga's defense has really elevated their ability. I think Jalen Suggs' athleticism as a backcourt with Nemhard and Ayayi is going to make life difficult for Tiger Campbell, Johnny Juzang, Jules Bernard. Jaime Jaquez is going to have to be phenomenal. They're going to need to have Corey Kispert shoot poorly, and they're going to need some great discipline from Cody Riley, from Nuba, from Mackie Etienne on Drew Timme, who just took Evan Mobley to school. So I feel pretty confident if Gonzaga is able to play and is fully healthy, they will be in the national championship chasing perfection. The other game is one that really intrigues me. And I don't want to go too into depth because we will be talking about this on the normal episodes of the College Sports Hive. But what I will say is Houston is a really good team that relies on rebounding, getting more shots up, getting more possessions, and they shoot a lot of threes. They're analytically very good. They please the analytics folks, and they play great defense, and they please the old school basketball fans for that way. Kelvin Sampson's a great coach. He's kind of having a little redemption in Houston's been a really good program the last few years under his lead, after a stressful tenure at Indiana, and that kind of tarnished his name. So I would say that this game relies on how many rebounds can Houston get against a team that won't be playing zone against them, where Syracuse played zone, Oregon State played zone, and they were able to get ridiculous amounts of rebounds and steals. Baylor also takes care of the ball very well, won't play zone, but they are small. Their defensive rebounding rate is pretty poor. So I think Houston will get boards. But Baylor's guard defense is very impressive. I think Dejan Giroux and Quentin Grimes are going to have their work cut out for them. Marcus Sasser too. And then on the other end, that's the exact flip side, is can Dejan Giroux stay in front of Davion Mitchell? Can they do so without collapsing down and allowing open threes? Baylor's the number one three-point shooting team in the nation. Who hits shots? Jared Butler hasn't even had a great game yet, but it feels like Baylor's been, I wouldn't say untested. I think Villanova gave them a test, but they haven't been battling it in the last few minutes. They've had certainty at this point in the season and in the tournament. They've had certainty they're going to win those games. So Baylor's keys, I think you just got to knock down some threes, because I think they're going to try to take away Davion Mitchell's drives. And that means Maceo Teague, Jared Butler, Adam Flagler, Matthew Meyer have to hit threes. And I think Matthew Meyer and Mark Vidal are the two keys to this game, rebounding the ball, and also Matt Meyer's ability to take bigs away from the basket. You don't want Fabian White, fresh off an ACL tear, guarding Matthew Meyer. You don't want Gorham guarding Matthew Meyer. I think that he's a mismatch. He's an X factor in this game, and Mark Vidal's just raw physicality and athleticism can really help. I also think Flo Thamba and Jonathan Chama-Chachua will play huge roles in this game, might get extended minutes, but those two won't be in what I consider the most potent lineup for Baylor, which is Mitchell, Butler, Teague, Vidal, and Matthew Meyer. So that'll be very interesting to me, and I think Baylor's taking care of the ball and forcing turnovers is going to be big. Well, the quality of shots that Houston takes sometimes aren't the best, but they get so many rebounds. If they're able to maintain an even number, maybe even just a few behind in terms of rebounds, they forced a lot of turnovers against Arkansas and got out and scored 21 points in transition, fast break points. If they can do that, they're in great hands. I'm personally dying for an opportunity to watch Baylor versus Gonzaga. They were supposed to play December 5th, and December 5th, that Gonzaga had COVID. And a COVID concern, I should say, and that didn't happen. And I really want to see these two teams that I've said are the best two all season play against each other at full strength. And I'm really hoping that Gonzaga is able to do so with their COVID scare. And I want a great game between Houston. I really like Houston. This is a team that I was high on at the start of the season. I got a little scared of because of their strength of schedule not being very strong. But I really appreciate their system. I love what they do. But I just want to see this matchup. I think college basketball, like as a whole, wants to see this matchup, and I'm going to be cheering for it. So that's kind of all I've got for you today. I know that's kind of rushing through a lot of topics. Please reach out to myself, to Scott. We love hearing with you guys, hearing from you guys, interacting with you guys, and we'd love to answer any questions you have about the Final Four matchups, about some stylistic breakdowns. We'll do some in-depth previews, or any questions you have about Roy retiring, some of these coaching vacancies or hires, what we think will happen, what we think the tenures will look like that have just begun, and where their coaches that we thought might have been better options. So please let us know. We really appreciate you guys listening and your interaction with us. And that's all I've got. So that's another Thulin Takeover Thursday. And just watch some old North Carolina and appreciate Roy and appreciate the great coaches in college basketball as a whole while we have them. This to me reminded me of that these coaches have lives outside of basketball, even though it may not seem like it. And he's enjoying it. So enjoy Jim Boeheim, enjoy Mike Krzyzewski, enjoy Bob Huggins, some of the great coaches that have been around for a long time, because you don't know when they're quitting. And it took me by surprise. I wouldn't say I'm emotional by any standard, but it made me reminisce. And I might watch some old North Carolina tonight and just appreciate what I saw and what made up my childhood, what got me into college basketball. So thank you for listening. And as always, have a great day.